Thank you for making time for us, Secretary Nelson. And I know that you've got some numbers right now that you want to share as of today from the Secretary of State's office.
Yes, we are really happy to report that early voting numbers are record-breaking. We have now, as of right now, 2.6 million Texans have early voted in this election. That's about 14% of all registered voters. And of course, our numbers for registered voters in Texas is up. So we're seeing a wonderful, very healthy turnout for early voting.
Why do you think we're seeing this healthy turnout more so now than the previous 4 years?
Well, of course, in presidential election years, you always have a bigger turnout, and we have more Texans now than we had 4 years ago. But also, there's been a lot of effort on the part of many entities to help potential voters understand why it's important to vote. We, in fact, at the Secretary of State's office have a voter education campaign that we've been operating since before the primary in telling people how they can get registered to vote, what they need to do to be a voter in Texas. And so an awareness that is there on the part of potential voters to get them to sign up, register, and then to go vote, I think has been very well conducted.
And you want to make sure and clear that everyone knows the role of the Secretary of State.
Yes, yes. When I served in the Texas Senate for 30 years, and I thought I knew everything the Secretary of State was responsible for. Since assuming this role, I've learned so much about the responsibilities that I wasn't aware of before. Most people know that the Secretary of State is responsible for the administration of the elections in the state of Texas, and I would say that's our most important job. The Secretary of State also is responsible for all business and government filings in the state. If you want to do business in Texas, you have to file with the Secretary of State's office if you want to change business titles. Last year alone, we processed 12.5 million applications, documents in the Secretary of State's office, and that includes business and government filings, but tremendous role and responsibility. Secretary of State also chairs a wonderful committee called Border Trade Advisory Committee. We meet 4 times a year by statute and deal with border trade with our most important trade partner, Mexico. That is a job that I didn't know, and because I am Secretary of State, I automatically chair that committee. It has been a wonderful opportunity.
Eye-opening.
Yes, yes. I am also the International Protocol Officer for the state of Texas. The governor calls me his ambassador to the world. So of course, there's a lot of interest on the part of other countries for doing business in Texas, for interacting with Texans, both culturally, business, economically, and I am the protocol officer for that. So that's been a really fun job for me as well.
Well, thank you for further clarifying the role of the Secretary of State. I want to jump back in with these record early voting numbers. I want to talk about what happened on Monday in Tarrant County. As early voting began, we now know a voter made a mistake on his ballot and it was rectified. But how it was portrayed on social media for millions of people to see was that the machine purposefully switched his vote. Can we talk about the damage misinformation like this creates?
Yes, I'd like to talk about that. You know, rumors and misinformation has always been a part of elections. What has amplified that, though, is social media. And rumors catch fire. That is a perfect example of what actually happened and what was rumored and then amplified as truth. And it's very difficult to counter that with the actual fact. And thank you to WFAA for making sure people understood what was really going on there. We work so hard to make sure that the elections in Texas are secure, that they are done. We work so hard to maintain the integrity of the election process, to make sure that every vote counts, that we're counting every vote, that we go through a huge process to inspect every single machine to train all the people who are working in our county election administrators' offices and down to the precinct level. And what is damaging is that sometimes when these rumors and misinformation get out there and get amplified, it could discourage somebody from voting and thinking their vote doesn't count. And I want to counter that. I want to assure Texans that Texas is known all over this country for having the example of what other states should do to provide secure elections to its voters.
And like you say, a lot of misinformation continues to hit the news and social media when it comes to voting. So as Secretary of State, I was curious, do you take it personally when people attack the process?
No, I learned a long time ago not to take things personally. But I consider my responsibility as Secretary of State to be really a sacred responsibility to protect the sanctity of the vote. And for people to worry about whether their vote counts is important to me. I want to assure people that their vote counts and we're going to protect that vote. You know, my dad was a World War II veteran. And when I was a little girl, he would talk about, and we always got to go with my parents when they voted, he would talk about how that right to vote is a sacred right. You know, he would say, that's your voice. You are voting for people, and right now the presidential election is getting a lot of attention. But the vote is not just for the president, it's all the way up and down that ballot. So you're voting for people who are going to be making decisions that affect your life at every level, county, state, national, and that's your voice. Your vote is your voice. And my dad, boy, he instilled in us that you have to vote. That's one of your most important rights.
And in protecting that right, I know that this week you and Attorney General Ken Paxton sued the federal government for refusing to verify the citizenship status of potentially ineligible voters on Texas voter rolls. So you're talking about 450,000 voters whose citizen status has never been checked because they registered not using a Texas driver's license, but instead one of the other forms. So what is the concern specifically about these 450,000 registered voters?
Oh boy, well there's several questions there to answer because first of all, that 450,000 number is a number that I'd like to narrow down some. We in Texas every day go through a process of going through voter applications, registrations, making sure these are qualified Texans. And over the past 4 years, we've probably taken about 1 million people off of the rolls. Now, the greatest number there are people who have moved out of state. Second, unfortunately, would be people who've passed away. And so when you narrow that, we finally ended up with really about 6,500 people who are, we need to verify whether they're citizens or not. We do a pretty good job of narrowing that down through Department of Public Safety. When people go in to apply for a driver's license, they're asked, are you a citizen or not a citizen? And of course, you are not permitted to vote if you're not a citizen of this country. But most of those are defined when they go to apply for a driver's license. Then there are other sources too. If somebody is, if they get their jury duty summons, they're asked there, are you a citizen? And any that show up there as non-citizens, that feeds into us. And there are other ways. But so we've narrowed it down, but we need to have a way. I don't want anyone who is qualified to vote to be denied that vote. That would be terrible. I also want to make sure that nobody who's not a citizen is trying to vote, which is against the law, by the way. And so we are trying to get from the federal government a way to submit those names that we haven't been able to narrow down to find out whether these people are citizens or not. And that takes us to the question that you asked about, we have asked the federal government formally to tell us how we can get those names to them and find out. And we're still, at this point, trying to get to that process.
This close to the election, though, why wait till this point where the federal government isn't going to be able to do anything before November 5th? And doesn't this lawsuit itself then have the potential to create misinformation?
Right. Why wait? We haven't waited. We've waited to sue because we thought that we would be able to get this information, or for them to tell us how to do this without, unfortunately, much cooperation. We should be able to get. And in fact, Congress had a bill that would require a national-wide, but it didn't pass. Anyway, we haven't waited, but we've waited to enter into a lawsuit to try to. We've got to be able. There has to be a better way. There has to be a better way.
But why not? Why didn't y'all do this a year ago? File the lawsuit.
Because we thought we would get better cooperation. And we've asked and we've asked and we've asked and tried in different ways. We thought maybe the federal legislation would pass and that would provide a path.
But they did register with one of these other forms, right? It just wasn't with the valid Texas driver's license, right?
Well, here's the process. And we are catching, I think the number is much lower than the 6,500 number of potential non-citizens. But when somebody applies for a driver's license, we are able to, they enter on there, and nobody is issued a driver's license. They're issued a limited, there's a term for it, limited technology maybe, driver's license, that has that stamped on it. So we would know that that person didn't show documentation that they were a citizen. Now, here's the issue though with those 6,500 people. Between the time they were issued that limited driver's license, that could have been a person that became a naturalized citizen, which does entitle them to vote. And so, and I want to give them that privilege. In fact, if they're a naturalized citizen, they probably really, really take that to heart, that right. So what we're doing now is if somebody, and I've sent instructions to all 254 counties, if they come in with one of those limited driver's licenses, if they have a driver's license they show as their photo ID, they're entitled to vote.
Or a passport.
Or a passport. There's 7 different forms of identification. But if they have one of those limited driver's licenses, they also are, they can fill out a provisional ballot, but they've got to prove with a naturalized citizen documentation that they have, since that has been issued, become a naturalized citizen. They'll be able to fill out a provisional ballot, and if they can come in and show that, fine.
So in 2020, the Texas legislature passed a law saying that we have to have specialized software to keep the voter rolls clean, yes, like preventing double votes and voter fraud. Texas and many other states were using a system called ERIC, Electronic Registration Information Center. But in 2023, Texas pulled out of that system, and we have yet to replace it. Doesn't that put us in violation of our very own law?
No. ERIC was a system that was participated in by quite a few states, Texas being one of them, that helped us exchange information, for example, if somebody moved from one state to the other, or some other things that we could share. States were pulling out of ERIC, and so the information that we were, and Texas was paying a pretty hefty price to participate, the legislature decided they didn't want us to participate anymore. So what we as an agency had to do and are doing is coming up with a process to replace that will accomplish the same goals. I have to tell you, with so many other states pulling out, the information that we were getting, big population states, the information we were getting was not as useful as I think we can develop on our own. And we've been working on developing a substitute. Many of the things that we are doing were what Eric did. We've got memorandums of understandings with other states that allow us to, we share our information with them, they share it with us about who's moved. We, of course, check to see if people are deceased. We have, what we're trying to get from the federal government is, citizenship verification. And we will have a replacement developed before the deadline that the legislature gave us. And I think it'll be a probably better process.
When was the deadline? Next May?
I'd have to look at the legislation to see, but we haven't met it yet.
Because we were told that there was a replacement coming in the next couple of months. What's the update on that? Like before the end of the year?
If I can get through these these elections. Yes, we're very close to having a replacement. We are doing everything that Eric did. We're just doing it in many different ways, and we'd like to have it all put together in a central and a formalized process that we go through.
So for the people who are concerned that Eric went away and hasn't been replaced yet, does it make this upcoming election less secure?
No. This upcoming election will be the most secure election Texas has ever had. And we are very, very focused on that. So I want Texans to be assured that this coming election, their vote will count. Their vote will count and will be secure. Privacy is a big issue. We've had to balance. Transparency has been a big focus over the last 4 years, and the legislature's passed some very good legislation to provide a more transparent process. But at the same time, privacy is a huge issue, and people want to know that their vote is kept secret and secure. And so balancing that too has been a real challenge, but we're going to do that. And I've talked to some legislators about potential legislation that may make it even better next time.
So how do you reassure the public about fairness and integrity of this election to your best ability when voters on both sides fear improprieties?
Yes. I'm a former teacher. And I think
God bless you.
Education is always the answer. If people will go, we have a website called Votetexasgov. Votetexas.gov.
That's where I got this list.
Good. If people will go to that website, it tells everything that we have done to make sure. We've been working since well over a year, laser focused on making sure this election is done properly, that a person's vote is kept private and secure, that things are as open and transparent. If people understood what the processes are before, during, and after an election to make sure their ballot is kept secure, I think they'd be very impressed. I would advise people to go work, go volunteer, go work for an election, be a poll watcher, go work. They'll see how, I got to tell you, till I got this office, I didn't know all of the processes that we go through. Many new that have been put into place.
You mentioned the poll watchers.
Yes.
So what is their job? What are they allowed and not allowed to do? Is there training?
There is training. They are there to watch, to be, extra eyes on the process to make sure that everything's being done above board. What they can't do is interfere with the process. We have some very enthusiastic people who want to be poll watchers sometimes. There is a training so that they know, well, you can be there, but you can't interfere. I also think it's real important for the public to know they are all poll watchers in a sense. If they ever believe that there has been an impropriety, either with their ballot, somebody else's ballot, or somebody casting a vote, go to votetexas.gov. They can file a formal complaint, and that complaint will be addressed, first of all, at the local level, and if it's not taken care of, at the Secretary of State's level. It's important for the voters to know the Secretary of State administers the election, but in Texas, the election is conducted at the county level. That also, by the way, keeps the elections even more secure you have 254 very well-trained election administrators at every single county level. And you have some safeguards there. We at the Secretary of State's office are responsible for administering, overseeing the election process.
You mentioned the election administrators. In this country, it has been proven that violence is a possibility with elections. The voting public thinks about it now. So what do election administrators, what do they do differently in our 254 counties now to prepare for this possibility?
It is so unfortunate that, and I think social media exacerbates and maybe even sometimes encourages what I absolutely, my number one concern is the safety of the people. And God bless those people who are working our elections. That's what makes this country great, is that we have the opportunity to cast a vote. But those people who are working the polls need to know that we are protecting them. I have twice a year in Austin, we gather those election administrators and anybody else working at the elections that they want to bring in Austin to do some training. Education's important, and if they know how to do their job, do it well. Any updates from the legislature. This year, we also brought in people to talk with them about how to de-escalate. We had a whole session on de-escalating some of the very angry people that might come in sometimes. You know, I have the wonderful opportunity to go all around this state, and most people in this state are going about their daily business. They go in, they cast their vote, they go take their kids to the soccer game or go to the grocery store. They forget to thank the people working those elections, by the way. But there are some people, a very small number of people, who are angry about something.
And what is your message to them?
Well, my message to them is there are ways to address your concerns. There, you know, first of all, you go and you talk to the person. By the way, posted at every election site in the state of Texas is how people can file a complaint, who they should talk to. And there's a person right there at their polling place they could talk to and voice their concerns, but do it in a nice way. Things do happen. Things do happen. There will be, with 18 million people hopefully casting their vote, there's going to be a glitch somewhere. And they may be rightfully concerned. We will address it. We will take care of it. That person in Tarrant County, if the ballot they cast, you should always, by the way, look and make sure that it is, before you submit it, make sure that's who. But if they look at that and see, wait a minute, this isn't who I pushed that button for, they can take that, they will, what we call, spoil the ballot. They'll put it in an envelope, give them a new ballot. In fact, they can do that with 2 extra new ballots. There are ways to deal with that. But anger is not, you know, we all need to be a little kinder, not just with elections, but with everything.
Totally. But if someone does get angry and goes to a poll and has disruptive behavior, what is your message to that person?
Well, threatening violence is against the law. And our election administrators are, we've unfortunately had to coach them through how to deal with angry people. And threatening violence is against the law. I'm sorry that we live in a world where people don't know how to control that anger sometimes. They have every right to be concerned. If there's a legitimate concern, call my office, file a complaint. We will make sure these elections are done properly. But threatening violence is unacceptable. And I will protect the people that are administering these elections.
When you saw that video go viral on Monday, what was your first thought to yourself? Be honest, what'd you think?
That we all need to turn off our cell phones. there are always going to be rumors and misinformation, and quite honestly, if they go to Votetexasgov, they can find out exactly what we're doing to prevent that kind of thing from occurring, or if it does occur, what somebody can do. That was one incident with, I don't remember, in Tarrant County, I think they had 58,000 people voted that day.
And to clarify, he made the mistake.
Right.
It wasn't the machine
Right.
that switched up his vote.
Right. It amplified, and not just in Texas, but all over the country. And my reaction to that is, turn off your cell phones. Here's what you need to do. You need to make sure you are registered to vote. You need to go in and cast your vote. And by the way, take the proper form of ID with you. It'll make those lines go a lot faster.
I'm ready to go.
Check your vote after you voted. Make sure it's properly reflecting who you want to vote for. Feed that in, get your sticker, and go home and live your lives. Thank somebody when you walk out the door, too.
Good reminder. Gillespie County did hand counting for the primary, and workers, as you know, did not finish on time. Is any county in Texas hand counting ballots?
To some extent, yes. Very small numbers at one point in the process. And we always hear this recommendation. In fact, there's been legislation proposed to require hand counting. You know, that isn't foolproof, by the way, either. And it did take a long time. You have to have a lot of volunteers, a lot. I think that Gillespie County was a good example for people to look at who are enthusiastic about hand counting to see what challenges they encountered.
Are they doing it again in the general?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they are or not.
Which counties are? You said there are.
Yeah, I don't know
Okay.
off the top of my head
Sure.
which are and which aren't, but I don't think that.
Is that
I
a
hate to
financial
even say it.
strain?
Of course it is. Yes, and it's a. It's not as easy as it would seem. You know, human error is definitely a factor in hand counting.
Poll workers, have there been any complaints of intimidation? It's already happened?
I'd rather not even answer yet. I'm always concerned. And again, I will protect the people who are doing this very important work. It is against the law to threaten someone.
You've talked about the record number of voters now registered in Texas.
Yes.
How rewarding is that for you?
Oh, very, very. We have a voter education endeavor going on since before the primary. And I got to go all over the state and you know, not tell people who to vote for, but to tell them how to vote. And I went to college campuses, and I went to community events, and first of all, I love going out and meeting Texans all over this state because we are so blessed to live in the best state in the whole nation. And to talk to young, probably first-time voters and tell them about my dad and why it's important to vote. Sharing with them, making sure that our population is as well educated as we can make them in terms of what they need to take with them, get those lines moving. And it's very encouraging to see the enthusiasm for exercising their vote, no matter who they vote for, but exercising that very important privilege we have. It's very rewarding.
A few years ago, you were headed into retirement.
I retired.
But like Mike Corleone, we Texans pulled you right back in. Now you're tasked with managing a safe and secure election for millions of people. What's the thing that keeps you up at night?
I worry, and not just election related, I worry at the civility, or I will say the lack of civility that is occurring in not just our state, but our whole nation right now. I worry, Cynthia, you know I have grandchildren. And
12.
12, thank you. Why have we reached the point that we can't disagree agreeably? And that keeps me up at night, and very little worries me like that does. And it's not just elections. Of course I worry about, if my election workers are threatened, that worries me. The safety and security of the people who are working our elections concerns me. But that feeds into something bigger and even more important, and that is why? What has happened? What can we do to help Texans be more civil to each other? And I think that will serve us well, not just with elections, but with everything we do.
Fill in the blank. If you walk into a poll location and threaten or intimidate one of our poll workers,
yes, well, law enforcement will step in. We have election workers. Oh my goodness, we have so many people, inspectors all across the state who are making sure the process goes smoothly. Sometimes it's just an education problem. People run into a glitch, but we have people watching all over this state to make sure that there isn't intimidation going on.
Anything we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure you let the voters know what's on your mind right now?
Voters in Texas need to be assured that Texas elections will be more secure than they've ever been, that their vote matters, and that they need to go to Votetexasgov and see what they need to take with them so that they have the proper forms of identification and go exercise their privilege of voting.
And I will not let this interview end without bringing up the Jane Nelson Institute for Women Leadership.
Yeah.
This will be your legacy.
Yes, Texas Women's University has established a Women's Leadership Institute that is training young women in leadership in government, leadership in business, leadership in their communities. We've got women from all over Texas who have volunteered to mentor. We've got wonderful coaching going on, training, and this is bipartisan, by the way, but training young women. I wish I'd had that. I grew up in an era where I don't remember many women leaders in government or in business. And we need to be teaching future generations. Part of what we can learn and part of what the Institute provides is a wonderful museum up there that talks about the suffragette movement and all the very successful women that there have been in Texas in politics and government and business. And by the way, suffragette, do you know my grandmother, when she turned 21, could not vote because she was a woman? That's hard to imagine.
And that lights a fuel under you.
It lights a fuel under me. Do you know that when I turned 21, I could be denied the privilege of serving on a jury because I turned 20, because I was a woman. When I turned 21, that didn't happen until 1975. And it's hard for us to imagine that young women need to know, young men too, and understand that we've worked hard to gain those privileges, and we shouldn't forget that. But we also need to teach our young women and men how to be leaders, how to work together. We are all in this together. And if we show how we can accomplish success for all of us, as a state, as a nation, we'll all be better off, and those kids and grandkids will be better off too.
Well, as we wrap up, I asked you if I could, if we could touch on this, but your transformation, health-wise, is admirable. Take us through your journey. of your weight loss, of everything.
Yes, well, sometimes we reach a point that we have not been paying as much attention to ourselves as we should. Women are notorious for that, by the way. We take care of the health of everybody else in our family. We forget about ourselves.
Fall apart.
And my doctor told me quite bluntly, you need to take off some of that weight and you need to get some of the stress out of your life. Woo! People ask me what I've done because, thank you for noticing, but I've been very, it's pretty basic. You got to cut out the junk that you're eating, and I started, quite honestly, by reading labels and getting rid of high fructose corn syrup. Dropped 15 pounds. And then sugars, and then pastas, and you've got to retrain yourself, and it's not easy at first, but I feel so much better. And then the next step was not sitting behind a desk all day long, but getting up and moving around, and the stress part, that's the other thing that sometimes women are, we let stress fold into our bodies, and we know that stress affects everything from weight to, a vulnerability to all kind of diseases.
Heart disease.
Yes, yes. And so I tried to learn different ways to deal with that stress.
Do you have some people who automatically assume Ozempic?
Yeah, of course, of course. But there's a much cheaper, easier way to do that, and that is eat right and exercise and get the stress
You're
out.
so boring.
I know.
Thank you so much for your time, Secretary. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate your interest.